Welcome everyone to Open Eco Homes and our tour Renovating with the Future in Mind. My name is Alana Sinclair. I am the manager at Cambridge Carbon Footprint and I'll be chairing this evening's session. I am joined tonight by our two hosts, Amy and Will Smith. They will be showing us around their home virtually this evening. Amy and Will be talking us through their renovation of their 1920s semi, and they did quite a thorough renovation, and they'll be talking us through their design, build, and technology choices. So without any further ado, I would love now to introduce you to Amy and Will, who will tell us all about their fantastic retrofit project.
Thank you, Alana. So we started off really with.
Are you? Who are you? Okay.
I'm Amy, and we started off with preparing a design for the house based on the fact that it's 100 years old in the year we started the project, and we wanted to make sure that we kind of renewed the life of it really, and gave it 100 years for future use, hopefully. So we wanted to reduce the carbon footprint associated with the house, and particularly the running cost of it, but also restore some of the character that had been kind of lost over the years and make it a functional and beautiful home, full of kind of natural materials and repurposing and reusing as much as we could, wherever possible, really. So the starting point, yes, was a 1923 built semi-detached property. It needed a lot of work. It had been rented out for, I think, about between 6 and 10 years. So it hadn't had much updates done to it for a long time. It had solid walls throughout and very limited loft insulation. And the boiler that was here was a gas combi boiler that was 20 plus years old and was already leaking. So yeah, it wasn't very efficient at all. So yes, this is the house as it was, the front and the back, which had some slightly strange extensions and kind of lean-tos, and it wasn't actually leaking, the conservatory, but it was very cold. And the kitchen was, I mean, livable, but it was very small and cramped and very detached from the rest of the house, certainly for modern living. So we really wanted to make the layout of the house much more suited to entertaining. We love having friends and family over. And at the moment, before, you really couldn't speak to anyone if you were stood in the kitchen. You couldn't partake in any conversations or anything. So it was really important to us to give the flow much more connectivity to both other rooms, but also to the garden. So we started the project in November 22, and it's taken us sort of 18 months. We're nearly there. We designed it alongside an architect. So I'm an interior designer, so I worked on all the interiors, and I did a lot of the project management throughout the build. Both myself and Will and family members we roped in along the way did quite a lot of certainly demolition and kind of any other different trades really that we felt we could tackle and that were appropriate for us to tackle. But the bulk of the project was run by a main contractor, and he was absolutely excellent. It was just great that we found someone we could work with and kind of become friends with as well. So we were lucky. So yeah, wherever appropriate, we tackled things ourselves, and left the scary stuff to the pros. So this was the demolition phase. So externally, we took all of those strange looking extension parts off the back of the house, and kind of took it back to its original structure. And then internally, we stripped all of the walls back to brick. The plaster wasn't in a great shape anyway, and we, partly from an aesthetics perspective on the outside, we liked the look of the brickwork, so we wanted to keep that but we needed to find a way of insulating it. So we chose to insulate on the inside. Although it obviously does sacrifice a little bit of space, it was the best option for us and this property. So hence why taking it all the way back to brick. Walls and internals wise, we moved most walls. So that, yeah, hence why there's, as you can see from the right-hand picture, there's very little of, apart from the chimney breast, and one room downstairs that remained in the same position. So this was, the picture on the left is actually a little bit before we'd taken so much plaster off. And things like all of the floorboards are the original 100-year-old floorboards, and we retained those. In fact, throughout, they were only in existence upstairs anyway. And we loved things like the lath work. So I'll go on to talk about that in a little bit later, but we tried to retain some of that as well. On the right, the roof was actually leaking and it was in terrible state. So we had to do that, even though that wasn't necessarily part of the extension as such. So we did strip the entire roof, but we kept all of the original joists and timber work, apart from a few areas where we had to splice some sections in to repair. But that was quite minimal. We were quite lucky with that. So this starts to show the extension taking place. So what we actually did is we replaced, not completely the footprint of those original lean-to kind of extensions, but very similar area. We replaced half with a 2-story extension, which you can see in the centre here. And then to one side, which is where the conservatory was, we kept it came out to the same point, but we just left that as single story. This here on the left is showing the extension, which is the upstairs bedroom, which allowed us, it started as a 3-bedroom house, and we wanted to make sure, but it had no bathroom upstairs, sorry. So it allowed us to keep the 3 bedrooms, but also start adding in a bathroom upstairs, family bathroom, and we squeezed in a tiny little ensuite as well. So that was really the main reason for doing such an extensive extension in terms of going up a story as well. We had to rewire everything. Our electrician was phenomenal, but the board is probably a little bit more macho than a standard house. So everything is on a separate circuit, which was, well, it's made it fantastic for future-proofing it. But yeah, obviously a lot of work, but no, it's, I think, a good decision. So I'll hand over to Will to talk about the technology.
Yeah. Consider it a 3-bedroom house. I think we worked out there was over 10 kilometers of electrical cable. That sort of went into the property, and he did say, a kilometer per square foot of air or something. It was the highest install he'd sort of ever done, and he does quite a lot of commercial work. So it's sort of, I think to some extent that also indicates some of the changes that are required to part of a general renovation, but also part of the technology that we can also add into our properties nowadays. So around that part, as Amy started off and she mentioned, whilst it wasn't necessarily a key driver, but it was certainly very important in terms of reducing the carbon impact of the house, and what comes with that obviously is luckily to some extent is reduced costs, and we'll talk a little bit about costs, not of the project build itself, but of the ongoing costs of running the house a little bit later. But central to this was obviously replacing our heating system. So we started with a combi boiler, incredibly inefficient in itself. Doing not all combi boilers are, but this one in particular was, and it was gas powered. So we could have continued down that route, but A, we didn't want to, but also B, actually there was a practical reason. We've also put a porch on the front of the house, and that ran directly over the gas pipe. So we'd have had to move the gas pipe anyway. So it made sense for several reasons to move away from fossil fuels in the property. And central to this was the inclusion of an air source heat pump. We didn't physically have the room to put you see for the photos, and there's not physically room to put in a ground source air source heat pump, and it may well have been overkill for the size of the property anyway. So working through New Heat, who again, a really experienced company in this sort of area, really useful to have that kind of support in this ongoing process. I mean, there's a huge amount of research that can be done anyway, but it's nice to have that sort of backup. So New Heat supplied the NEB unit, or NEBE, depending on how you like to pronounce these things, and then it was then installed via our plumber. So they don't provide the installation; they only provide the actual kit. But it is a full kit with a full set of plans that can be installed effectively by any plumber, and then they come and certify it. So it does mean we don't necessarily have to go out and seek out a specific heat pump registered plumber. So maybe it's exactly a little bit more flexible. Yeah, it doesn't have to be MCS registered themselves. Sorry, the plumber doesn't. So but this system therefore still means you can meet the MCS standards and then enable you to achieve the bus grant, which is currently sitting at a quite handy £7,500. That actually increased during the length of the project, which is also quite helpful for us. In terms of what that powers or what that pushes through in terms of how do we then heat the house, we've then got underfloor heating installed across the entire house. So both ground floor and first floor systems as well. So the ground floor has two systems within that. So obviously it's a renovation. So we had some existing floors. The existing ground floor house was or still is a solid concrete floor. And we had to use it as a low pro type design, so it was much shallower. And then on the new floors, so it's in the porch area and in what is now the kitchen, that was all new slab, and we could build a more traditional underfloor heating system into that. And then we came across a challenge around heating the upstairs to ensure that we're meeting equivalent heat losses. So we need to have some heating upstairs, but the rooms we had made slightly smaller in some spaces, but the layout of the rooms meant that we didn't necessarily want to move to a radiator system. So we went and sort of went full into it, and we've gone for a first floor fitted full heating system, which is fitted between the ceiling joists. And again, that was a task that we could quite happily carry out. Got a bit of neck ache doing it, while standing upside down with your head the wrong way up. But overall, it was as straightforward, really, as the ground floor. Okay, so this is a little bit of those picture of the system. So on the left-hand side, air source heat pump, traditionally, really traditionally fitted, just mounted directly outside the utility room, with a nice short length of pipe work into the hot water tank, which is, as I said, very neatly fitted in, really tightly fitted into the space there. And I think Amy might touch on that a little bit later, around some of the compromises that maybe we had around this space. But so we've got a very large water tank with a buffer tank sitting directly underneath it. Again, system that's designed for relatively small spaces. I think we've very much pushed that to the absolute limit in this scenario. This is now all boxed in, so it's away from we have a couple of dogs, but away from them and away from everything else. So it's nice and tucked in there. In terms of the underfloor heating system, as I say, lots of different styles. This is just a very straightforward to lay click-in system. So you're just laying the sheets down and following a diagram produced by New Heat. So again, really straightforward system, designed to be installed by amateurs or maybe slightly skilled DIYers. So all really straightforward to find. I think the challenge was in some of these small areas where we've got lots of different zones coalescing into one single manifold. It got a little bit tight, but again, all that means is you've got a nice warm floor throughout, but particularly warm floor in certain places. So the other part of lowering our resource use was obviously trying to reduce the overall demand of the building. So we don't have to be putting as much energy into the building to make it comfortable to live in. So central to this was the insulation. The addition of the insulation, as Amy said earlier, we internally insulated all existing external walls, but also our party wall with our neighbour as well, just to provide some overall cover. This was in a insulate plasterboard system, so 50 mil of PIR insulation, bonded to the plasterboard. As this is a 1920s property and it hasn't solid wall, but it's also got lime mortar. So we did have to install this with an air gap. So in total, we've lost about 90 mil on all those walls. So in the room that we're in now, the living room, that's coming on two sides. But with a few other changes, it's not made the house feel any smaller overall. So actually, yeah, it doesn't make it feel as if you've lost that as much room as that almost sounds sometimes. And then new walls are obviously built to current building standards, so with a really healthy cavity in those as well. And then in terms of the off-loft insulation, again, we just were trying to just at least get up to minimum standards currently. So we added in a total of 300 mil of loft insulation, which allows us to board out the loft as well and gain a little bit of storage space overall. And then the other part, say we did try to, really, I don't know, we didn't try to go the full way, but we were aware that I think particularly around the heat pump, one of the things I found looking at some of the data behind it is that you really, I would certainly recommend having some solar panels to help to ease the pain, I suppose, to some extent of transitioning from predominantly gas heating and water heating processes to fully electric. So we installed 2.1 kilowatts of solar panels, slightly lower overall size of system that we would have liked. We were hoping to have a couple more on there, and actually discussions out of our ecohomes tour suggest that we might be able to put some more on, so some slightly different roof orientation. So yeah, so that's it's a solar panel, and then that was then connected into 10 kilowatts of battery storage. And again, so that ratio is quite high because again we just wanted to make sure we could store as much as possible, either during the summer when we've got high production, or actually be able to utilize like a lower tariff overnight to purchase energy, store it, and then use it during the day when we needed to. So that's one of the things we've started to really optimize the system around, with those three components and how they're working, which is very, very different to how you'd heat a traditional home, as it were. So yeah, that's just some images. So yeah, so this is then that's the solar panels for, and then this is just the inverter and the two batteries. So it's installed up on the loft. It's up on the wall, so it's all fixed to the wall. I know there's some concerns around having these types of systems in the loft. They are bolted to the wall rather than necessarily fitted solely to the ground. So we believe we're sort of within specs now. Okay, and then energy is obviously really important, and obviously possibly the area that hits our pockets the hardest sometimes. But what's also really important, particularly east of England, I'm working in agriculture, so I'm very aware of the weather, frequently checking my weather apps and trying to understand if we can do whatever we need to do outside. And I think it's very clear that the direction of travel is going to be that the country in a whole is going to be getting dry, or certainly having longer periods of dry, supplemented by very intense periods of rainfall. So again, try to buffer this and try to reduce our reliance on external sources. We're never going to be an off-grid home, but just try to reduce our overall reliance. So whilst we had the digger there, this is often a thing we say, while we're at it, was a bit of a catchphrase. While we had a digger on site, we'll just dig an enormous hole in the garden to fit a rainwater harvesting system. So this was a 3,000 litre tank buried in the garden. So all you can now see is the manhole cover in the garden. So that's all that's there. So fully contained, and this collects rainfall off one side of the house, off the majority of the roofs, is filtered to a degree and sits in the tank for use. Is then pumped up to a small header tank in the loft, from which it's used to feed all of our toilets, the washing machine, and an outdoor tap. We hope to maybe have it as the dishwasher, but obviously there's regulations around potable water, and that's you're getting contact with your mouth, you eat your plates, etc. It needs to be potable water, so it's had to only go to almost grey water facilities. But even so, it's a reasonably it's the right quantity. We ran out just about for a couple of days, I think, this summer during that really hot period, but overall it's lasted us an entire year So obviously, it's the right size tank. We didn't need to go any bigger. Okay, and then I think materials, back to Amy.
Yeah, so as I started to say at the beginning, we were keen to try and reuse as much as possible, and also just retain a lot of the character. So any materials that we were purchasing that were new, we tried to make sure that they were natural. But if possible, we reclaimed things. So the extensions, we were conscious that we obviously they were going to be brick. And actually the bricks that the original house was built from were made, I think, actually in the village all those years ago. But sadly, obviously, they don't exist anymore. So we did spend a long time hunting for bricks. They do look very similar to a Cambridge white, but they're not exactly the same. Yeah, reclamation yards are great, but they're not the cheapest. So then we were fortunate in the end. I think we found a guy through Facebook in the end, who'd just knocked down a substantial part of his house and had almost exactly the same bricks. So yes, that was a fantastic find. In terms of other reclaimed materials, we have used, I mentioned the lath walls from the upstairs of the original house earlier. I actually just fell in love with them in terms of the look of them. So we maybe crazy, I know, but we decided to keep all of them, well, a large section of them actually, and they have now been incorporated in the interiors, which I'll show a picture of in a little while later. In terms of other reclaimed things, we found a lot of our flooring, timber flooring, either reclaimed in the sense that we bought it through eBay, but it was sort of, often everyone buys 10% extra for just in case, and then they have some left over. So a couple of our sources were that situation. So it was a new engineered wood floor, but it was someone else's kind of leftovers. So saves that going to waste. And then we have one floor which was originally in someone else's house, and they'd taken it up after, I don't know how many years, but several years of use, and we've now put it down here. And then in terms of new materials, the flooring in the kitchen, we chose limestone, which is, yeah, great. It's got a lot of life to it, and it's natural, even though it is a new product. And then the roof, we looked at reclaimed slates, but we were kind of advised against them in terms of a longevity perspective. So we chose natural slate for the roof tiles, but we bought new ones. But we did find reclaimed slate to slab all of the front steps, and we've got quite a lot left over. So we're hoping to also create a patio probably next year if we get to the garden. And then in terms of other kind of repurposing, we created a kitchen island from some old chests of drawers, and yeah, various other sort of antique finds and heirloom pieces of furniture along the way have kind of found their way into lots of different places that we wouldn't have necessarily used them in before. So yeah, this is photos to illustrate some of this. So yeah, on the left, you've got that's the lath work that's now been, each individual one was hand nailed into the walls. Something I hadn't mentioned actually was all of our internal doors. So we retained all of the doors, the original doors, and we had those stripped, and they've now been reinstalled. And then we needed an extra 4 doors, I think it was. So we actually found 3 from a house very locally on Facebook Marketplace again, literally another village, and the house was only about a year older than this one. So that was, again, like just the best find. And then there was one other we found again from eBay, I think. But yeah, so all stripped, all original old doors used throughout. And then, yeah, the central 2 photos are starting to show some of the old furniture combined in the new part of the house. This is in the corner of the kitchen. And then the third picture from the left, that one shows that's the reclaimed old, like used floorboards that we've installed. So those ones had been used before. And actually what's lovely about it is it gives the project a bit more life, I think. The one place that we've got newer flooring upstairs it feels different. So I'm really pleased that gives it a bit of warmth and character, I think. Yeah, finally on the right, you can see the reclaimed slate slabs on the front steps. And these ones, so again, from the left, this is now what the rear of the house looks like. So you can now, without scaffolding and things. So yeah, we've now got a lovely connection to the garden space, and all of that back ground floor section is a lovely kitchen, which you can see in the next photo, which has given us loads more space, and it's so much easier to everyone join in. You can eat, you can chat, you can be cooking. It works really well for us anyway. And then the next one along is our ensuite bathroom. So we managed to squeeze in a very tight bathroom. I think the actual room is something like 2.8 meters by 900. So we've made the most of every space we could possibly find to put things really in this house, which I think has worked really well for us. And again, on the right, that shows a bit of the lath wall again. And I'll pass it back to Will to talk about some of the data.
Yep. Indeed. Okay. So I think what was obviously not possible, I suppose, just to be relatively upfront, I suppose, is that the house was just remarkably different. The house itself, the fabric of the house, how we're heating it was also very different. Also, the way we're heating was very different. It was a house that got cold incredibly quickly. So we were heating it very intensely in the mornings and in the evenings, and then allowing it to go cold again during the daytime. And even when it was reasonably warm outside, we would still be using a reasonable amount of heat or energy to actually try and just get the property up to a vaguely comfortable standard. And I think Amy will attest this. We wear a lot less jumpers now, so it's not only that we were using more energy, it's also we were using a lot more energy and still not being very comfortable. Whereas now we are using a lot less energy and we are far more comfortable in the house. So it's not an absolute, it's really hard to compare in terms of what we've actually done, but at least we can start to show some of these numbers. So in terms of the actual property itself, what we're pulling from the grid in effect. So let's say, so all the blue bars are historic imports. Some of these figures are average over a couple of years. We lived in the property for 3.5 years prior to starting the work, so we had a bit of an understanding of what we wanted. Obviously, that's quite important when renovating, rather than this, it's not a brand new building that you can visualize it quite the same way, understanding what you do like and don't like about property, or if you don't even like it at all, you want to move again. So so that's sort of historic over a period of time. We don't have the full year because we've only really moved in back again in January, so we just wanted to be accurate around what we're demonstrating. And then the current import, and that's just a single year's data, but it demonstrates the significant reduction that we've already seen, even where we've had quite cold months in January and February, cold average in some cases. What this equates to in total is a nearly 80% reduction in energy use measured by kilowatts. So that, as I say, that indicates all those losses that are happening throughout the house, the inefficiency in the system. What we've done as a total has achieved a really, really significant reduction in the overall energy use. Unfortunately, to some degree at least, this isn't entirely reflected in the costs, and this is where the disparity between the price of a unit of gas and the price of a unit of electricity really comes to show. So despite that, January is a particular example, and I appreciate we're using sort of an average versus a specific year, but in that year, or in this year, that was the single most expensive month of energy we ever paid over the last 4 years, because we'd shift away from gas and we're now using a lot more electricity to drive the system. And that's currently about 3.5 to 4 times the unit price. There are other months, obviously, so in July and August, particularly, where we had almost no energy costs at all. The solar was doing most of the heavy lifting throughout the day. and then charge up the batteries to be used at night. So I think there's still a bit of optimization to happen that we're still learning about in terms of exactly where the tipping point is, when we should start to be pushing more energy to the batteries during the day to be ready for the evening, or just waiting for it to charge up overnight and using the low tariff. So this is maybe not fully optimized, but I think it does hopefully go to just to demonstrate that we can reduce our carbon emissions as a or the fabric of the house carbon emissions very significantly, but the running costs part of that isn't necessarily reflected. But equally, that is out of our control, right? So we can't do much about that, and hopefully we're in a position that as and when the energy systems pricing structures catch up a little bit, then we're in a real position to take advantage of those. Yeah. Okay, I mean, this is sort of both of us. I think there's some sort of incredibly important lessons that we've learned through the sort of it's an 18-month build, but the 6 months before that of all the planning and things like that. I mean, I'll kick it off, but I think the first thing is compromise is vital, and this is regardless of the project, or what your aims are. But obviously, perfect doesn't ever exist. I think that's very clear. But obviously, in terms of for us, there were the four elements. There was the time. We wanted to be involved with the project. We were involved with the project, but there was still a limit to the time at which we could commit. Obviously, a project of this scale, we had to move away. We were lucky with that availability of housing, but even so, we wanted to get back in as soon as possible. So there's an important time aspect. There's obviously the financial aspect. There was a pot of money. It ran out. So at some point, you have to balance those things. You can't just keep buying in labour or buying in expertise as much as you'd like to, and sometimes getting your hands dirty is a good thing to do. There's obviously I've called it morals, but the element of choosing some of the materials we used, the insulation, for example. We looked at options to see if it was already we needed a breathable layer of some sort, or we needed to have an ability for the brickwork to breathe. So we did look at hemp systems, or like a hemp fiber board or a wood fiber board. But the compromise there was that to get the same level of insulative ability, they would have had to be so much thicker. We'd have just about crammed in this room with a couple of settees to achieve the same reduction. So our belief was that actually by using a non-natural product would have overall ensured the house was still livable, but also we're achieving far better thermal gains or improving the insulation to a far better extent. So over the lifetime, we're actually benefiting more overall. That might be different with the new build, of course. And then obviously space was the other thing. And again, we couldn't do everything. We briefly mentioned mechanical heat ventilation systems. Would not have ever worked in the type of property that we're in. So there's always these compromises that are going to exist in any project, and I think we hit the limit of some of those. But overall, I think it's worked out. And we don't really look back and go, "There's any one thing we're really missing," or anything like that.
Yeah, I think again, sort of kind of along the lines of compromise, but also really about planning. So I think the earlier on you can kind of plan, research, come up with the things that you prioritize, really, the things that are your absolute, like, I will never give that up, and have almost that list, and then have I'd love to have that, I really would love to have it, but I could live without it list. And as soon as you can have that, the better, because then you can really design the space and incorporate all of this technology, if you're talking about technology, or just any other needs you've got, to the actual best it can possibly be done. But it's much more difficult to do that along the way, or to do it kind of retrospectively, because you get to points where you can't come back, you can't make those changes. So I think trying to sort of really I suppose maximize the usability and the functionality of the space as a whole, the whole building. The key for us was really just how much time we spent on research and design and planning, and redigging and tweaking things before we started, rather than as we went along. I think that's any other.
No, I don't think so. I think just like last point, I think, with the utility room, we said how tight we squeeze things in. It's all about this idea of a utility room, and really it's become a small plant room. And even for a relatively modest 3-bedroom house, we've still ended up with having a plant room in effect. And you often see them on big grand designs, or maybe tuned in the seminar last night. A large expansive house that needs all this space. When we start to add in all these things, the heat pump, the rainwater harvesting, the requirement for a larger board, a larger consumer unit. We're not on 3-phase, but we are prepared to, it's all set up for us to do so. So we are in a position that we can transfer quite easily. When you start to add in all these little boxes as well, you think of it's a solar panels. Well, that comes with 4 different little boxes that all need to be available and visible at all times. And then the heat pump comes with a control panel and another consumer unit. All these things add up, and you end up with the whole wall is full of things. And that's not a negative. I think it's just like the honesty of these things need some space, and in small houses it can be done. I hope we've demonstrated that it does need that thinking about really far ahead. They can't just fit on a wall, a little bit like a common board. You can come in and pick 5 different points in the house where it could go in. Often there might be a point where an air source heat pump system might be able to be fitted into a house, and that might, you don't want that to dictate the design, but also you want to make sure it's incorporated within it, and the rest of the design fits around it in a sensible way. It doesn't doesn't cause issue with the rest of the design, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think that's everything from us. So yeah, over to any questions from us.
Hermione, would you like to unmute and ask your question about protecting the floorboards?
Yes, I just wondered, you were praising your floorboards, and clearly you must have had to take them up. I didn't quite understand whether you'd had to take them up or you were putting things between the joists from the ceiling. Was that the underfloor heating for the first floor?
Yes, so because they are the original ones, they've got these giant flat nails in, which make it almost impossible to take them up without damaging them. So the decision was that if we wanted to keep them, we had to leave them in situ. So we left them exactly where they were, and all of the first floor underfloor heating was fitted from below. So yeah, in between the joists looking up. So we'd had to take the ceilings down anyway, so we had that ability to access that.
And where did you get your new ones, your new old ones?
Sorry, the new old flooring.
Yep.
That was actually just from Facebook. We found Facebook Marketplace. We found someone, actually, and eBay. We found several people that had various selection of things.
I think what I will say is that and again, it's just it's a choice to do it, but you still have to go and drive around at like slightly odd times of the night to go and pick up these things from someone, and to drive out to Suffolk somewhere to pick up 12 meters of floorboard, for example. So it was quite an adventure from where we got everything. Yeah. But again, that's the compromise. You can't go, if you take this route, or part of these routes at least, you can't say, oh, I want that particular type of flooring. You kind of get the flooring with whatever's there, which is quite nice. You're limited by it. You can't use every shade of slightly off brown that the flooring companies offer. But again, it means you quite quickly settle. Go, right, yeah, that's right, and we'll go and get it. But yeah, incredibly cheap way of doing it as well, relatively.
Yeah.
That's great, thank you. And Hermione, while I've got you anyway, would you like to ask your second question about insulating the solid concrete floor?
Oh yeah, I didn't quite understand for the old concrete floor, the original one, whether you'd done anything with insulation before you put the underfloor heating.
No, so that is one thing that we wanted to do, because obviously that's the only thing that wasn't insulated effectively. We did get a quote to do that, but it would have meant we had to dig up all of our floors, and then insulate and then relay the existing, like the main slab. And the quote was, I can't even remember now.
But it was beyond what we wanted to
yeah, it was very many thousands, and we didn't have that left in the budget, sadly. So no, we did check with the underfloor heating company, and they said that with the low pro system, which is designed for existing buildings, that it wouldn't decrease the efficiency of the system dramatically. And it's they understand that does happen quite often. So we didn't do it.
Right. And Mark Norman, you had at least one question. In fact, you've got a couple of
Yeah, you've actually answered one, but I will ask a second one. So you said you had to have an air gap between the insulation and the wall because it's lime mortar, which is moisture permeable, right? That's the idea of bolster. Did that limit how much insulation you had? Would you have had more if you didn't have that?
No, I don't think it would have limited what we had. I'm trying to think of the specs of the. I think it was just a case of a balance between products that are available. I think is one thing. I think we could have gone to a thicker insulation board. Again, I think it comes back to those things. So space was one thing. If we move the walls in another, I don't know, 30-40 mil, it might start to felt a little bit more enclosed in all spaces. It would have added cost to the overall. There is some additional cost. So I think we just had to find a bit of a balance. I think actually 50 mil was actually that's what the architect came up with. So to some extent we wouldn't question it, and he felt that it was a sufficient amount to improve the efficiency of the home.
I think you could, if you chose a natural product that was completely breathable, and you also opted for a completely natural plaster inside, so a lime plaster, then you could have not had the air gap. In which case you could have had, obviously, you could have filled the whole space with insulation rather than having, I think it's a 25 mil air gap. So I suppose in that sense, yes, you could have had more insulation. It just wouldn't have been a new product. It would have had to have been a natural product, if that makes sense.
Okay, and Mark, your other question was about the size of the solar panels.
Well, you said that the MCS regulation limited the amount of solar you could have. Is that
yes.
right? And why is that?
Yeah. So when the original when the person we found gave us like an initial quote, they just use a Google image to go, I reckon you can put 6 panels or 8 panels. I think it was 8 panels initially. When he then came to measure up and actually look at the roof, he said we can only have 6 because it had to be so far from the edge, or you couldn't be close to the edge, and that was related to MCS standards, which is for me just really, really frustrating. I don't really understand how does that impact it. But anyway, it impacts it apparently. So we then had to reduce down to the 6. Obviously that's only if you are going to definitively be MCS registered. So we opted to, so we can export if we want to. I think in reality, the system size, because we haven't got a huge excess of power. It is in the, when we do it's in the summer. Actually, it's probably, we probably would have been better off having a couple of extra solar panels and not go down the MCS route. But that's that's sort of questionable in reality, and it's probably future proofing of, if we want to move out, at least someone's got that knowledge that they can export to the grid if they feel they want to. So.
Okay,
thanks.
then I've got a question. It's a little question. Having suffered from slippery paths in the past, I'm questioning, how is your slate doorstep in terms of slipperiness when wet?
It seems absolutely fine. They're not a honed, like smooth finished slate. They are quite undulating, and the builder that installed them for us, he was impeccable at making sure that the runoff was absolutely perfect across all of the slabs, to the point where he came and chiseled away little tiny bits if they created little puddles. So I think as a result, that means it does dry off extremely quickly, which I think helps with that. It means that there's not the same risk that it's going to build up with kind of mosses and things. I confess we haven't had it installed for that long, so we might see a change in the winter, as obviously you've got longer periods of damp without drying out.
But so far they've seemed fine.
So far they have been great.
And we are going to add a railing around the front as well. So at the moment that's not quite happened. So there will be something to help support people. So it's quite a long drop actually if you're ever here. So yeah.
Okay, and then Ian has a question.
Yeah, well, but I also like to say a very interesting talk, and I really do feel for you, because about 20 years ago we had a 1923's house like that, solid, in one of the villages around Cambridge. There was we did some things to it, but at the end of the day we just moved. That was the easier solution. I was just going to ask you, do you know what level of COP you were getting from your air source heat pump?
No, the answer is no. I've tried to spend a bit of time. I don't know if it's just me, or I mean, no, I think partly it's me. So the air source heat pump is an F series. It's not quite as I think the S series from Neve is like the next step up, and there's a lot more accessibility. You have to download a slightly old program and plug it in with a wire and have about 5 of these happen just at once to be able to connect it to it. So at the moment, the short answer is no. I don't know. But the answer is no. I don't know. Based on sort of energy usage, again, it's so hard to pick it up. But I suspect most of the time it's running just over 3. But that's a bit of a gut feeling. Just trying to look at some ratios. But yeah.
Good. Okay.
It can't tell you how much heat is generated then, because some of them do on their sort of control panel, but
yeah, not on the control panel. It's as a unit, it seems to work really well. It hasn't missed a beat. There doesn't seem to be. Yeah, you can set a holiday time, and you set your hot water temperature, and you can do a high heat purge to prevent Legionellas on a cycle. All those things, but that you can't. And maybe it's a good thing. I think the guy who came and set it up basically said, "It's set up, don't touch it." and I don't know if that was sort of like a threat or just helpful. So we've pretty much left it to it. So I haven't tried to play around with it. I think I'm quite inquisitive, so it's probably quite a good thing that maybe it has been just left to itself. But yes, from what I can tell, there is a remote link that you can get with, and at some point when I have a bit more time, I'm going to try and get into it and just to pull out.
That's a bit like mine.
Yes.
there is theoretically a way that I can put a wire in and get some monitoring off of the heat meter, but no, it's beyond me.
Yeah. And again, I mean, we could have put a small meter in, like a little meter, just to look at energy use specifically into the heat pump, things like that. So there are sort of ways of that it's something we could do, but it's not something that's a priority for us. If I'm honest. Yeah.
Well, you've lowered your bills, so that's the main thing.
Absolutely, yeah. We can show that. Yeah.
Are you talking about bills? This is another one of mine. I think it's the last one of mine. Are you using a time of use tariff?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So we have a nighttime tariff. I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's about half price between midnight and 7. So it's quite a long night time. It's not as low as like a electric car, particularly electric car type tariff, as an absolute, but it is for a longer period. So say for 7 hours rather than maybe 4 or 5, which seems to be fairly common. So we are using that, and again, that's why I say there's a few caveats around that. Some of the costs only happened in March, so maybe those January figures are a bit artificially high if we'd have been able to optimize it, and also again, it's getting to grips of when should we be charging at night and when should we be charging. So like the give energy system or the ecosystem of the batteries and the inverter is good, but again, it seems to sort of just adds a bit of functionality. Updates come along, and it's got a bit better from my perspective, being able to program when we're pulling from the batteries or when we're sending it to the batteries in particular. So still, I think there's still work there to do, and again, we haven't looked into any further optimization of it at this point. Again, just we're going to sit and enjoy the house for a little bit before we tweak too much.
Okay, there's a couple of questions from Sheila. Are you on audio now?
I am. We have a house that's built 1900, and it's very similar to yours in terms of its construction, lime mortar, etc. But ours is incredibly drafty, and so I wondered, did you have an air tightness test done? Also, we have this problem with how we're going to insulate, and I wondered what floor insulation you had. You've already said about not insulating your concrete floors, but I wondered if you'd put down any kind of air tightness membrane or insulation under the wooden floors in the ground floor. And also my last question was, have you an approximate cost of the big ticket items?
So first of all, I'll talk about the air tightness. We haven't done a test yet. I haven't really looked into how to go about doing them yet. So it might be something we do, but I think again, it's sort of, we're just trying to get our heads around the fact that we're nearly there. So yeah, it might be on the agenda. Under all of the like timber floors, we've used forgot what the name of the project. It's basically an underlay, but it is designed as an insulation, but also to conduct the heat from underfloor heating. So that we have noticed a difference, certainly in this room, which is one of the rooms that's got the existing concrete slab. And that definitely has helped. I think that layer, quite a thick layer of membrane. In terms of the new areas, ground floor, they were all insulated under the concrete. Well, no, that's not true. The rear extension was insulated below the concrete slab, so basically at foundation level across the whole thing, and then the concrete slab was poured on top.
What did you use for that?
That we used a PIR.
Again,
yeah, foil backed PIR. I can't remember exactly how thick that was. I think it was
100 mil.
100 mil, I think. But yeah, I'd need to check. And then the front porch, because of the levels on the plot, there's quite a big significant change in levels from front finished floor level on the front of the house to the outside. So we had a block and beam floor construction there, and as a result, we insulated on top of that structure, and then we just had a vapor barrier, thin membrane that was laid between the insulation and the underfloor heating, and then the screed poured on top.
Thank you.
Last question.
Oh.
Your last question.
So what was the last question? Oh, cost of money, big ticket items.
The big tip, approximate cost.
I don't know if I've got a total.
It's a bit, yeah, I'm not sure. So I think I mean, it's bad that we don't know this. So one of the difficulties, right, was that the air source heat pump, all the underfloor heating, what else? All came from new heat, was sort of like chucked in as one thing. I got this feeling like air source heat pump and auxiliary things was about 13,000, and then you had the £7,500
grant.
The grant. I mean, I can tell you it costs about £3,000 to get the gas removed, which again is an absolute bugbear of mine. You know, we're trying to remove, you know, not I mean, okay, we didn't just shut it off. I know we could have just had it capped off and left. We had to have it capped off and moved because of where we're putting the porch. So that for me was a frustrating cost and a surprising, unexpected cost as well.
In terms of the solar and batteries, that came in at
7.
So, yes, I was going to say 7.5.
Now, but yeah,
I think it was 7.5 thousand. I think other items.
Yeah, windows.
When we replaced all of, because we had sort of 10-15-year-old leaking PVC double glazed windows, so we replaced all of those at the same time because we were putting new ones in the new parts anyway. So those we used they are timber frame windows, but they're again the latest double glazing, and those came in, I think, for everything including the large patio doors and the roof light at 18 think 18,000.
I think there was elements there where I think, you know, we could have gone down a different route, but again, I think there's a design desire at least to return it to a bit of its character original. So we had some original photos, so the windows are very in keeping, they're different colour, but they are very in keeping with the overall style, and hence other little details. We kept all the fascias and soffits painted black, barn paint, all wooden, to just to try to restore that. It's not a fully characterful home by no means. It's a former 1920s council house. It's not got any fantastic features. We did find a little upstairs fireplace, so we've tried to retain that, but we have just tried to say bring it back to its original standards to some extent, but with a very much modern twist on it.
Yeah. In terms of things like windows, I appreciate that is a big cost. And if you chose, there are definitely cheaper options than timber frames. Again, I think it comes down to your budget and your taste, and also the style of your house as well.
Yeah.
If you were to get an electric car, do you have the capability of putting in a charger? Is that what you were worried about the third, the three-phase supply for?
Yes. So we spoke to our electrician about it, and he felt that it probably wouldn't be necessary, which is why we haven't actually got three-phase. But because we were having both the heat pump and the and we were considering an electric car in the future, we just weren't sure whether we might get to that point. So at the point it enters the house, we have the capability that's already set up. So basically from the moment we connect to the mains, it's set up for three-phase. There's just two phases that aren't connected to the exterior mains, so that we don't have to do any work inside. If we ever change that, it would just be an external thing. And in terms of the car charger, we've got a socket, it's kind of just a box really at the moment. It's not a proper car charger, but it's a point that's all sealed up, ready for a car charger if we ever want to put one in.
Yeah, I think just the final point or additional point around the three-phase is that when we started to investigate this, so we're Southern Power Networks, I think, is the you know, it's not your supplier, it's the network provider. They don't currently upgrade to three-phase for free, whereas some network providers are. And the expectation is, I think there's a necessarily full white paper, but there were certainly recommendations that at some point we predict, we hope that will come as a free upgrade at some point provided by the network. So we didn't want to spend money on something that we didn't need right now, but if when it came to it, we might be in a position that it's done for us. So I mean, I suppose
we can always hope.
Exactly. Yeah. We always hope. I mean, like as a small example, like just for the water, we had an old lead pipe. Anglian Water came along and fixed it for free. You know, they came in and put a plastic pipe in because that's one of their things that they do. So we hope at some point something similar will happen with the electrics, and we can, when we find it's necessary to upgrade to three-phase, we'll be in a position to do so. So I think that was the other part, just thinking ahead. That's that planning part, thinking around, you know, this isn't just for us now, it's not just for us in next year, it's for us in 5 years, maybe 10 years, or for someone else that they not put out too much if possible.
Thank you. I think Alana's crossing me now because I haven't left time for her questions.
I've been really enjoying it, and they've been really good questions and really interesting answers. And it was very nice where you sort of circled back there to the title of your talk, you know, about sort of planning for the future. So well done there. Well then, thank you all so much for coming. I hope you found it interesting and useful. Have a very good evening.
Thank you.
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.
Thank you.